Coming to you from his downtown Denver studio, here's the Backstage Jazz Radio Show with your host, Steve Roby.
Welcome, friends at home and friends in the studio. This is the Backstage Jazz Show, and I'm Steve Roby. My guest today is multi-woodwind instrumentalist and composer Max Bessesen. We'll discuss his music and upcoming show at Dazzle. Welcome to Backstage Jazz, Max.
Thanks so much for having me, Steve.
Why don't we start with a brief overview of your music career and influences?
So I was born and raised in Denver, Colorado. I attended Denver East High School and learned from Keith Oxman, a wonderful saxophonist and teacher there.
Yeah.
And I started playing gigs on the saxophone when I was in my early teens. I participated in a lot of the education programs there, things like Statewide Jazz Band and CCJA with Paul Romaine and Chris and all the wonderful people at that program. And I learned just so much from my experiences there. Then I went to college. When I turned 18, I went to a college school called Oberlin Conservatory, which is in Ohio. And I studied with a great saxophone player there named Gary Bartz. I also took some lessons with the legendary drummer Billy Hart and trumpeter Eddie Henderson. Studied there for 4 years. And after I finished school there, many of my friends from school, we moved to Chicago, where I lived for 4 years. And that was a fantastic experience. I played, 3-4 times a week. I had a weekly gig at a club there called the Green Mill. I got to play with many of the best in that scene, including guitarist Bobby Broom, hornist Greg Ward, and trumpeter Russ Johnson. I played at many of the festivals there, Chicago Jazz Fest, Hyde Park Jazz Fest. Just had a wonderful time. I taught lessons as well. I gave some master classes at some of the schools there, too, some of the colleges. For the last couple of years, I've been living here in New York City. I got my master's at Manhattan School of Music. And I've been active performing here as well. I've played with a lot of my peers, people my own age, as well as some older musicians, including Mimi Jones and Tyler Mitchell, who are bassists. Mimi Jones is best known for her work with Beyonce, and Tyler Mitchell played with all of the greatest in jazz, including Sun Ra and Roy Hargrove. And I have some upcoming performances with big band composer Darcy James Argue as well.
Nice. Can you cite a musician or a band or a song even that inspired you to become a musician?
Yes, I can. So, like I mentioned, I went to East High School and I studied with Keith Oxman. And at this time, we were still listening to CDs. Streaming had not yet taken over our music consumption habits the way it has now. And Keith had this amazing cabinet of lots and lots of classic jazz recordings and classical music recordings. And I really don't think there's anything I was exposed to in high school that was as transformative as that cabinet, because he'd give out the stuff for free. So wow. I would empty my backpack into my locker at the start of a weekend, and I would fill my backpack with these CDs, and I would take them home and I would listen to them. And it was just so important for me. I burned them onto my parents' desktop computer so that I could have them when I needed to return them, or I could listen to them after I needed to return them. But the first one of these, it didn't immediately stick when I listened to this music. I had listened to some jazz growing up. My dad is a jazz fan and a music lover of all types. And so I had listened to some jazz, had been exposed to it, but I maybe hadn't delved very deeply. So Keith kind of tried to get me interested in some stuff when I was 14. So the first recording he gave me was Caravan, Art Blakey's Caravan. And, this album, it starts very fast. It starts with Caravan. It's, well above 300 beats per minute. Art Blakey is playing some amazing stuff. But for my ears at that time, I said, what is this? I don't understand this. So I said, I'm not sure I like this, Keith. And he said, okay. So then he gave me John Coltrane's Love Supreme, which, as I'm sure most of your listeners know, is a transcendent piece of music. And I was like, I don't know if I really understand this. Of course, I would come around to both of these records later. But the third album he gave me, and this one really, really spoke to me at that time, was Charlie Parker with Strings. And that just went through me like a knife. Wow. I just loved that. I listened to it constantly. And like I said, I came around to all those other records and many, many other great records, too. That was a great experience for me.
Great. That's a great story. Thanks for sharing that.
Of course. Thanks for asking.
You suggested a few tracks to play from your album called Trouble, so our listeners can get a taste of your music. The first track is called Blue Glass Halo. Great title, by the way, which features trumpeter Ron Miles. What can you tell us about this track and the album?
Yes. So this is the first album that I recorded, and I recorded it in Denver at Mighty Fine Studio in 2019. Ron Miles was an important mentor to me growing up in Denver, so I thought there was nobody better to feature alongside my working quartet from Chicago, which are several other young musicians who are still living out there or nearby. This track doesn't have too complicated of a backstory. It was inspired by a dream I had, but I didn't remember the dream like many of my dreams. I didn't remember it very clearly after I woke up. I just sort of remembered a certain quality of light and used that sort of stained glass coloring in my composition of this piece. So it's inspired by dream and light, and it's very impressionistic in that way, and it features Ron. I hope you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, that's a great story. Thanks for sharing that. This is Blue Glass Halo off of Max Bessesen's Trouble album here on Backstage Jazz. My guest today is instrumentalist and composer Max Bessesen, and we're discussing his music and upcoming show at Dazzle. We're going to play another track off the album Trouble, and this one's called Bakkam. What's the backstory here?
So the year after I graduated from Oberlin, I did a fellowship with an organization called the Frank Huntington BB Fund. So this is much like Fulbright. It's a travel and study grant for young musicians. And I spent 8 months living in India and 2 months each living in Ghana and Cuba, studying music, doing a little bit of performing and traveling. It was a fantastic experience, and I encourage any young musician who's interested in doing something similar to check out the BB Fund, Frank Huntington BB Fund. But when I lived in India, I lived in a neighborhood called the Nungam Bakkam. And this was a place that was really all over the place. I mean, lots of people going in and out and all over. It's right in the heart of Chennai, which is the capital of Tamil Nadu, which is a state in the southern part of India. I was right there in the thick of it all, a little bit like I am here in New York City, but maybe even more activity. So I was going to see a lot of music, and I heard this amazing mridangam player. Mridangam is a South Indian drum. And I heard this amazing drummer named Trichy Sankaran, and he played this improvisation that just really knocked me out. I was recording it on my phone, and I transcribed just a little bit of it, but just the end, because that was the part that most interested me. And I used some of those rhythms and developed them into this piece, Bakkam. And so because it was the end of the improvisation and it was very much inspired by my experiences there in Nungam Bakkam, I took the front half of the name of the neighborhood off Nungam and just left the back half, Bakkam. This is Bakkam.
What a great story. What a musical journey for you to experience all those different cultures and music. That's fascinating.
That was very special, yes.
Wow.
Very fortunate to do that.
Well, let's listen to Bakkam. Again, this is off your Trouble album, and here it is on Backstage Jazz. My guest today is jazz musician and composer Max Bessesen. Let's talk about your upcoming Dazzle show. What can fans look forward to at the show, and who's going to join you on stage?
I'll be playing with some of my favorite musicians on the Denver scene. So I'll be joined by pianist Tom Amend, bassist Gonzalo Tepa, and drummer Drew Heller. Drew and Gonzalo and I had a really great gig just a few months ago at the Muse, and I'm looking forward to having Tom in the mix as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to play a couple of cuts off of this album that you've been listening to, Trouble, as well as some new compositions and a couple of compositions I've written specifically for this gig. So I'm really looking forward to sharing those.
What a treat. That'll be fun. I just had a few more questions before I let you go. What's the year look like ahead for you? Any new music projects or tours in the works?
Yes. So in January, I'm going to be doing a tour of the Midwest with a collaborative trio made up of a drummer named Devin Drobka from Milwaukee, a bassist named Ethan Fillion from Chicago. And we're going to be performing in Milwaukee, Chicago, and South Bend, Indiana. And that trio will feature music from all three of us. We've been playing together for many years now. Ethan, the bassist, can be heard on my album Trouble as well. I'm going to be doing lots of projects with other peers of mine, and as well as elders. The one that I'm most excited about in the immediate future is in January, second weekend of January. I'm going to be playing at the Jazz Gallery with Darcy James Argue. And details for all of these performances can be found on my website. The website is just my name, maxbessesen.com. It's a little bit of a challenging name to spell, but if you just search Max Bessesen, think Mississippi, and saxophone, you'll find me. Google will find me. I'm the only one.
Okay. I'll make it easy for the listeners too. In the show notes for this podcast, I'll put some links in so they could find your website. And I guess there's some links, social media links on your website as well.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. And my Facebook is just my name as well. Yeah.
Oh, easy. Good. Just a reminder for our listeners, Max Bessesen and his group will appear at Dazzle on Wednesday, December 27th for a 7:30 p.m. show. Doors open at 7. And for tickets and more information, go to dazzledenver.com. Thanks for your time today. It was a great interview, Max, and have a great show at Dazzle.
Thanks very much, Steve.
If you're enjoying the Backstage Jazz Show, we'd love for you to like, subscribe, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. And now, back to the show.
The Backstage Jazz Show was recorded at Little Raven Studios in downtown Denver, and our producer was Craig Stevens. You can find Backstage Jazz wherever you listen to podcasts. Be sure to stop by our website, backstage-jazz.com, where all past and current episodes have been archived. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can email us at backstagejazz@fastmail.com. This is Steve Roby. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Backstage Jazz.
You've been listening to the Backstage Jazz Show. Join us next time for more great jazz and interviews with your favorite musicians.